October 1942, RAF Airfield, Duxford, England. The morning fog rolls across the runway like a slow tide, swallowing the outlines of a dozen fighter planes standing silently under the pale light. Men in oil-stained overalls move like shadows between the aircraft, the clatter of tools echoing faintly through the damp air. Somewhere, a mechanic curses under his breath, another coolant leak on yet another American-built P-51 Mustang. Captain James Red Hollister of the Royal Air Force stands beside his grounded fighter, helmet under his arm, frustration carved deep into his face. The P-51 had been touted as the Allies' new wonder machine, fast, sleek, and deadly. But up here, over the skies of northern France, it's proving otherwise. She's fast. On paper, Hollister mutters, glancing toward the hangar where the American engineers are arguing again. A nearby crew chief sighs. Fast? Maybe downhill with the wind behind her. The Allison V1710 engine, powerful at low altitudes, is a disaster above 15,000 feet. Every pilot knows it. At high altitude, where the Luftwaffe's Messerschmitt Bf-109s roam freely, the Mustangs choke, sputter, and die. Above the clouds, American bombers are torn apart, unescorted. Below them, the RAF watches helplessly. But somewhere in that hangar, amid the scent of oil and frustration, a man named Ronald Harker, a Rolls-Royce test pilot and engineer, is about to change everything. Harker, a quiet man with the posture of a mathematician rather than a pilot, adjusts his goggles and steps forward toward a visiting group of North American aviation engineers. He's seen something the others haven't. Your Mustang. He begins, his British accent clipped, precise. The airframe is exceptional. Low drag, clean lines, near perfect laminar flow. But your engine, he taps the side of the Allison with a wrench. It's strangling her. The Americans exchange glances. They know it's true. The Allison V1710 was a dependable workhorse, but it was never meant for high-altitude combat. The British Merlin engine, on the other hand, is rewriting the rules of flight, powering the legendary Spitfire Mk9 to heights the Luftwaffe fears. Harker leans closer. Fit this aircraft with a Merlin, gentlemen, and you'll have something the Germans won't be able to touch. By noon that day, a message is drafted and sent to North American Aviation Headquarters in Inglewood, California. It's short, blunt, and revolutionary. Recommend immediate test installation of Rolls-Royce Merlin 61 engine in P-51 airframe. Most engineers would have dismissed it. Swapping engines between aircraft of different nations was an engineering nightmare. Mounts, cooling systems, weight distribution, and torque all demanded redesign. But there was something compelling about the idea. The Mustang's aerodynamic design, long range, efficient, and stable, paired with the raw power of the Merlin. It could be the miracle combination the Allies desperately needed. 3 weeks later, the experiment begins in secret at Rolls-Royce's test facility in Hucknall, England. Inside a drafty hangar, engineers work through nights lit only by the orange glow of acetylene torches. British and American mechanics stand shoulder to shoulder, tools scattered across the concrete floor. They call it the Franken Mustang. Bolts are replaced, mounts realigned, and exhaust stacks redesigned to match the Merlin's output. The first test model, dubbed the Mustang X, sits silently, gleaming under a single bulb. The moment is tense. The air smells of oil and cold metal. Harker gives a simple nod. Let's see if she sings. The starter motor whines. The propeller turns once, twice. Then a deafening roar fills the hangar. The Merlin engine coughs, then growls alive, its 12 cylinders pounding like artillery. The sound is pure power, deeper, smoother, hungrier. The Mustang shudders under the strain, tail twitching as blue smoke curls from its exhaust stacks. Harker's face breaks into the smallest of smiles. He knows, everyone in that hangar knows. Something monumental has just been born. Outside, the fog has lifted. A faint beam of sunlight spills through the open hangar door, striking the polished aluminum of the P-51's fuselage. Its nose glows red in the morning light, a phoenix rising from the failures of its past. In a war defined by steel and fire, one man's idea has just changed the fate of the skies. November 30th, 1942, Hucknall Aerodrome, England. A thin frost clings to the grass beside the runway as mechanics gather, breath steaming in the cold morning air. The Mustang X sits alone at the end of the strip, its propeller glinting silver in the dawn light. The freshly installed Rolls-Royce Merlin engine hums with restrained fury. Ronald Harker adjusts his gloves and leans toward the test pilot, Captain Ronald Shepard. Keep her under 12,000 feet on the first pass, Harker warns. She's got the heart of a Spitfire, but we don't yet know how she'll behave in a Mustang's skin. Shepard gives a half-smile. Let's find out. The Merlin coughs once, then roars to life, sending a tremor through the air. As the P-51 begins rolling down the runway, every mechanic holds his breath. At 90 knots, the tail lifts. At 110, the wheels leave the ground. For a moment, it seems to hover. Then the Mustang soars skyward, smooth, steady, confident. From the ground, Harker watches the silhouette rise into the cold blue, a streak of silver slicing through the English sky. It banks hard left, climbing effortlessly past 20,000 feet, higher than any Allison-powered Mustang could have dreamed. A voice crackles through the radio. Throttle response. Immediate. Power. Extraordinary. She climbs like she's got vengeance in her veins. Laughter erupts across the field. Even the skeptical American engineers can't hide their astonishment. The Merlin engine has transformed the P-51 from a sluggish escort into a predator. As Shepard pushes her to 25,000 feet, condensation trails bloom behind the wings like ribbons of white smoke. Then, with the horizon stretching endlessly before him, he dives. The airframe groans, the altimeter spins, and the Mustang screams through the air like a living thing. 400 miles per hour, 420, 430. Good God, Shepard whispers, gripping the stick. She's faster than the Spitfire. When the Mustang lands 20 minutes later, the airfield bursts into motion. Mechanics swarm the aircraft, touching the warm metal like a relic of some new era. Harker stands silently, eyes reflecting the rising sun. Gentlemen, he says finally, voice low. We just changed the course of the air war. Word spreads quickly through the RAF and up the chain of command to the U.S. Army Air Forces. Within weeks, the British Ministry of Aircraft Production sends an urgent recommendation. Proceed with immediate large-scale conversion of P-51 to Merlin power. Rolls-Royce modifies 5 more prototypes, each one outperforming the last. The Americans at North American Aviation catch fire with enthusiasm, and soon, the Packard Motor Company in Detroit is contracted to mass-produce the Merlin engine under license. The new variant is christened the P-51B, January 1943, Inglewood, California. At North American's vast production line, sparks flash like lightning beneath steel girders. Hundreds of workers, many of them young women, rivet panels, fit wings, and hoist engines into place. Posters along the walls read, "Keep 'em flying, and your work brings victory closer." Test pilots begin reporting impossible numbers. Range, nearly 1,600 miles with drop tanks. Speed, over 440 miles per hour. Ceiling, 41,000 feet. It's a miracle. General Henry Hop Arnold, commander of the U.S. Army Air Forces, studies the report and taps a finger against the page. Get it to England. Now. Within months, the first shipments of P-51Bs cross the Atlantic. RAF squadrons are the first to receive them. Sleek, unpainted aircraft with red spinner noses and an engine note unlike anything the Luftwaffe had heard before. By spring, American pilots begin their transition flights. They can feel it instantly. The responsiveness, the lift, the way the Merlin purrs even at 30,000 feet. The Mustang no longer feels like a machine. It feels alive. April 1943, East Wretham Air Base. Lieutenant Robert Buzz Miller climbs into the cockpit of his new P-51B. The canopy seals with a hiss. The control stick is warm under his glove. He looks out across the field where a line of Mustangs waits for their first escort mission to Germany. He presses the starter. The Merlin engine rumbles awake, a deep, steady growl that vibrates through his chest. Tower, this is Red Leader. Mustang flight ready for takeoff. From the control tower, an officer gives a single word, cleared. As the formation roars down the runway, dust and frost scatter beneath their wheels. One by one, the P-51s lift into the air, a flight of silver predators heading east into the rising sun. Far beyond the channel, in the heart of occupied Europe, German radar stations begin to light up. The operators glance at each other in confusion. New Jäger? New fighters? They don't know it yet, but the balance of power in the sky has just shifted forever. May 21st, 1943, 27,000 feet above Bremen, Germany. The sky is clear and brutally cold. White contrails twist across the blue like scars. Below the earth is a patchwork of rivers, rail lines, and factory smoke. And cutting through it all, 30 gleaming silver shapes moving in perfect formation. Lieutenant Robert Buzz Miller sits behind the gun sight of his P-51B Mustang, eyes narrowed beneath his oxygen mask. Through the canopy, he can see the bomber stream ahead, a column of B-17 flying fortresses heading toward the Focke-Wulf assembly plants. Today, for the first time, those bombers have real escort all the way to target. And back. Red leader to group, maintain altitude. Keep eyes open at 2 o'clock high. Static crackles, followed by a calm reply. Roger that. Nothing on scope yet. Then, movement. Tiny specks appear on the horizon, growing larger. The sunlight catches wings, dark, angular, closing fast. Messerschmitts. The radio bursts alive with shouting. Bandits inbound! 10 plus high, looks like 109s. Buzz tightens his grip on the control stick. His Merlin engine snarls as he pushes the throttle forward. The nose of the Mustang dips slightly, and the world rushes toward him in a blur of sky and steel. The German pilots dive straight into the formation, confident as ever. They've done this dozens of times. They expect sluggish P-47 Thunderbolts or Spitfires forced to turn back at the Rhine. But what they meet instead is something faster, smoother, and utterly relentless. Buzz rolls hard left, the Mustang slicing through the air like a blade. The gay forces press him into the seat as tracer rounds whip past the canopy. He pulls up behind a Bf-109 and squeezes the trigger. 4.50 caliber Brownings erupt in perfect unison. The rounds stitch across the Messerschmitt's fuselage. Flames blossom. The German pilot bails too late. Splash one bandit. Buzz mutters, breath fogging the mask. Around him, the air battle explodes into chaos, twisting contrails, smoke trails, and brilliant flashes of cannon fire. But something is different this time. The bombers aren't dying in droves. The escorts aren't turning back. At 30,000 feet, the P-51 Mustangs dominate. From the ground, German anti-aircraft crews watch in disbelief. The new Allied fighters are faster than anything they've seen. Their engine notes distinct, a deep, throaty roar instead of the high whine of the Allison. In Berlin, Luftwaffe intelligence officers scramble to identify them. Reports flood in, new American escort aircraft, believed to use British Rolls-Royce engine. Extremely long range. By summer, the German pilots have a name for them. Der Langstreckinger, the long-range hunter. Even the feared Jagdgeschwader 26, Schlaggeter, veterans of the Battle of Britain, find themselves outclimbed and outgunned. August 1943, U.S. 8th Air Force Headquarters, High Wycombe, England. General Jimmy Doolittle studies the combat reports spread across his desk. Kill ratios are staggering. Mustang squadrons are shooting down German interceptors at a rate of 4-1. But what matters more, the bombers are finally reaching their targets deep inside Germany. He turns to his officers. Gentlemen, we can now strike anywhere in the Reich, and still bring our boys home. With that, the air war changes overnight. The long, brutal daylight raids that once bled the 8th Air Force are now survivable. Each mission bleeds the Germans of more fuel, more pilots, more hope. February 1944, over Berlin. For the first time in the war, American bombers dropped their payloads over the German capital in broad daylight. Below, civilians dive for cover as air raid sirens wail. Above them, streaks of silver dart among black puffs of flak, Mustangs diving and climbing with impossible agility. A Luftwaffe ace, Major Walther Dahl, stares from his cockpit in disbelief. Verdammt! They follow us everywhere now. He banks sharply, trying to shake a pursuing Mustang, but the American plane stays glued to his tail. The Merlin's supercharger screams, keeping full power at 30,000 feet. Dahl throws his 109 into a desperate spiral. It doesn't matter. The Mustang stays locked, patient, precise, and fires. The sky flashes orange. Another German ace falls from the heavens. On the ground that night, in a smoky briefing tent near the French coast, Buzz Miller and his squadron celebrate in weary silence. The mission was brutal, but they all came back. For the first time, every bomber in their group returned home. Buzz leans against the wing of his plane, running a hand along the cool metal. The engine ticks softly as it cools, the red spinner flecked with oil and ash. He smiles. She's more than a fighter, he says quietly. She's a promise that we can win this damn thing. Behind him, the sun sinks beyond the airfield. Rows of Mustangs gleam in the amber light, their shadows stretching long across the tarmac. Above them, the roar of engines fades into the dark, the sound of freedom taking hold in the skies of Europe. October 1942, RAF Hucknall Airfield, Nottinghamshire, England. The morning fog clings to the grass like a ghost refusing to leave. A handful of RAF mechanics huddle near a silver prototype glinting under a pale English sun. The aircraft, sleek, long-nosed, unfamiliar, is about to make history. A few yards away, Rolls-Royce engineer Ronald Harker adjusts his goggles and glances toward the man standing beside him, Major Thomas Hitchcock, the American air attaché in London. Between them stands the future, though neither yet knows just how much it will change the war. Harker squints at the machine's frame. "It's lighter than I expected," he says, running a hand across the smooth fuselage. The design's brilliant low-drag laminar flow wing. "But the Allison engine," Hitchcock cuts in, "doesn't breathe at altitude." "I know." He stares at the horizon where the fog begins to thin. The boys need something that can fly with the bombers over Berlin. Not something that gasps at 20,000 feet. They exchange a look, a silent agreement forming. Behind them, a truck rattles up carrying the prized cargo. A Rolls-Royce Merlin 61 engine. The same heart that powers the Spitfire Mk9. Harker nods to his crew. "Let's see what happens when an American body meets a British heart." Over the next several weeks, the Hucknall hangar becomes a storm of sparks, oil, and ambition. Engineers crawl through the Mustang's frame like surgeons performing a transplant. Mountings are redesigned. Cooling ducts rerouted. The cowling reshaped to cradle the British engine's supercharger. They work late into the night, the clatter of wrenches echoing beneath steel beams. Coffee stains the blueprints. Cigarette smoke curls through the air. They are chasing something none of them can yet define, but all can feel. When the prototype now designated the Mustang X rolls out onto the runway, it gleams beneath the afternoon sun, its red nose freshly painted, its flanks still bearing fingerprints of grease and hope. Harker stands by the wing as test pilot Ronnie Shepard climbs into the cockpit. "Take her up gently," Harker calls. "Let's not break the future on the first go." The Merlin coughs, sputters, then roars to life, a deeper, hungrier sound than the Allison ever made. The vibration rattles windows and hearts alike. Shepard pushes the throttle forward. The Mustang leaps down the runway like it's been waiting its whole life for this moment. Within seconds, it's airborne. The silver body cuts through the clouds with astonishing grace. From the ground, all eyes tilt upward. Minutes stretch like hours. Then, through the radio crackle, Shepard's voice cuts in breathless with disbelief. "She climbs like the devil himself." He banks left, then right, testing the controls. The Mustang doesn't just fly, it dances. The Merlin's twin-stage supercharger keeps it breathing strong even past 30,000 feet. The airframe's efficiency does the rest. When Shepard lands, he doesn't even take off his goggles before shouting, "That's it, gentlemen. That's the one." Harker laughs, part exhaustion, part triumph. "Tell me you took notes," Hitchcock says, but he already knows this is no ordinary test flight. This is a revelation. In the following weeks, reports from Hucknall begin to circulate through both British and American channels. Engineers whisper about the results. The British Air Ministry takes notice. So does North American Aviation back in Inglewood, California. By December 1942, the decision is made. The Merlin-powered P-51B Mustang will go into production. The U.S. Army Air Forces officially adopt it. Almost reluctantly, at first few realize they've just secured air supremacy for the remainder of the war. And yet, for Harker and Hitchcock, there's no fanfare. No parades. Just another day at the airfield, another engine test, another prototype to refine. But somewhere deep down, both men understand. This moment will echo through history. As the sun dips behind the hangars, the Mustang's polished wings catch the last rays of gold. Its red nose gleams like the tip of a rising flame. The war still rages. Europe still burns. But the tide quietly, invisibly has begun to turn. December 1943. Debnam Airfield, Essex, England. The cold bites through everything, gloves, flight jackets, even the thick leather boots of the young pilots standing beside their aircraft. The air smells of oil, frost, and anticipation. Rows of newly arrived P-51B Mustangs shimmer under a pale winter sun, their polished aluminum bodies gleaming like blades. Captain James H. Howard, commander of the 354th Fighter Group, runs a hand along the red nose of his aircraft, affectionately nicknamed Ding Hao. Around him, mechanics tighten bolts, refuel tanks, and check the Merlin's throaty heartbeat. The war has reached a boiling point, and these new machines are about to prove themselves. Over the airfield's loudspeakers, a voice crackles through. "Gentlemen, today we escort the heavies, B-17s, all the way to Bremen. No turning back." A low murmur rolls through the pilots. This will be the first long-range escort mission deep into Germany. The B-17s, the flying fortresses, have been suffering catastrophic losses. The Luftwaffe's FW-190s and Bf-109s have been cutting them down mercilessly over Europe. The P-47 Thunderbolts can't follow them far enough. The bombers have been flying to their deaths, until now. The P-51's drop tanks glisten beneath its wings. Extra fuel, extending its range hundreds of miles farther than any other Allied fighter. Its Merlin engine purrs steadily, promising power all the way to Berlin and back. Howard pulls down his goggles. Let's go show them what she can do. Engines roar to life, the combined thunder shaking the frosted earth. Propellers blur. One by one, the Mustangs roll out and lift into the morning haze, wings flashing silver as they climb toward the rising sun. High above the channel, the formation levels off at 26,000 feet. The bombers come into view, a vast armada of silver giants, their contrails stretching like white ribbons across the sky. Howard keys his mic. Stay with them, boys. Remember, the forts are our lifeline. They dive into German territory. Below them, the land turns to patchwork, rivers, forests, and rail lines like veins across a wounded body. Soon, black dots appear in the distance. Enemy fighters climbing fast. The radio fills with static and shouts. Bandits! 10 o'clock high! F-190s! Lots of them! The Luftwaffe comes in hard and fast, their yellow-nosed fighters slicing through the bomber formation. The sky erupts into chaos, tracer rounds, black bursts of flak, engines screaming. Howard pulls into a climb, rolls over the top and dives. The Merlin howls. The Mustang feels alive beneath him, agile, powerful, precise. He lines up a shot, squeezes the trigger. 50 caliber rounds tear through the sky, ripping into the wing of a 190. Flames bloom. The German plane spirals down in smoke. Howard doesn't cheer. There's no time. Another enemy cuts across his path. He banks, feels the G's crush him into his seat, and dives again. The Mustangs sweep through the battle like falcons. Their speed and range change everything. They can chase, they can climb, they can stay. For the first time, the bombers aren't alone over Germany. As the sun begins to set, the surviving B-17s turn for home. The Mustangs, still circling above them, fend off the last desperate attacks. By the time they land back at Debden, the tarmac is slick with melting frost and exhaustion. Mechanics rush to count the returning aircraft. Of the bombers that made it to Bremen, nearly all returned. Losses are minimal, a miracle by the standards of 1943. Howard climbs out of his cockpit, face blackened with soot and sweat. He removes his oxygen mask, looks around at the line of Mustangs being refueled and rearmed for tomorrow's mission. She's everything they said she'd be, he mutters quietly. And more? Behind him, a ground crewman runs a rag along the gleaming fuselage, whispering under his breath. That's the one that'll win it. The night settles over the airfield. The engine's cool. But the sound of victory still hums faintly in the dark, like the lingering growl of a Merlin engine, miles away and climbing higher. February 20th, 1944. Operation Argument, later known as Big Week. The air over Germany is alive with fire. Dozens of American bomber streams, escorted by their new P-51 Mustangs, roar toward aircraft factories across Leipzig, Regensburg, and Augsburg. This week will decide who controls the skies of Europe and the outcome of the war itself. On the morning briefing boards at every 8th Air Force base in England, one word is underlined in red chalk: unrelenting. The plan is simple and brutal. The Allies will attack Germany's air industry every day for a week. The Luftwaffe will have no choice but to fight, and when they do, the Mustangs will be waiting for them. At 27,000 feet, the sky is silver and blue, a painter's dream, until the contrails begin to twist. Captain Clarence Bud Anderson, flying a P-51B named Old Crow, peers through the gun sight. Below, the B-17s crawl across the heavens, sunlight glinting off their wings. Tally-ho! Bandits at 2 o'clock. 20 plus. The radio explodes with chatter. German Me-109s dive in from above, followed by FW-190s attacking the bomber boxes head-on. Explosions bloom in the distance. Black puffs of flak and burning aircraft spiraling down. Anderson pushes the throttle forward. The Merlin engine screams, the Mustang surges ahead. In a heartbeat, he's behind a German fighter, the crosshairs steady. He fires. Tracers stitch the sky. The 109 bursts into flame and falls away, trailing smoke. Scratch one, Bud. Keep them off the forts. For years, the Luftwaffe had dictated the terms of air combat over Europe. But now, the hunters were being hunted. The Mustang could outdive, outturn, and outlast nearly anything the Germans threw at it. Its combat radius of over 1,600 kilometers meant American fighters could finally stay with the bombers all the way to their targets and home again. There would be no more slaughtered bomber crews flying unescorted through hell. By the third day of Big Week, Luftwaffe losses are staggering. Pilots once considered untouchable, men like Galland and Barkern, now speak of the Mustang in tones of weary respect. Captured German reports describe it bluntly. The new enemy aircraft, with liquid-cooled engine, possesses superior climb and high-speed maneuverability. Dangerous in every respect. On the ground, Allied intelligence analysts can hardly believe the figures. By the end of February 1944, the Luftwaffe's frontline fighter strength has been cut nearly in half. Factories in Regensburg lie in ruins. Ball-bearing plants at Schweinfurt smolder. And in the skies, the legend of the Mustang is sealed in gunfire and contrails. That night, at a dimly lit mess hall near Debden Airfield, pilots sit in silence over tin mugs of coffee. The air is thick with fatigue and smoke. Major Dong Gentile, one of the 8th Air Force's most celebrated aces, taps his mug against the table. "You know," he says, glancing around at the exhausted faces, "a few months ago, the Krauts owned the sky. Now they can't even reach us." Someone laughs weakly, someone else raises a toast. But behind the bravado, there's something else. Awe. They know what they've just witnessed. The balance of the air war has shifted. Thanks to a single brilliant decision. The marriage of the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine and the P-51 Mustang airframe. The Allies now have a weapon that changes everything. In hangars across England, engineers work through the night, refining, tuning, and testing. The Mustang's roar echoes across the countryside. Not the noise of a single plane, but the sound of a turning tide. Soon this fighter will lead bomber streams deep into Berlin. It will escort paratroopers over Normandy. It will tear through the skies of France, Italy, and beyond. And in those final desperate months of the war, German civilians will look up from the ruins and see the silver shapes of Mustangs wheeling high above, symbols of power, precision, and inevitability. Because the war for the skies was no longer a question of if. It was a question of when. And the answer was carried on the wings of the P-51 Mustang. March 4, 1944, over Berlin, Germany. For the first time in history, American bombers and their fighter escorts are striking directly at the heart of the Reich. The sky is a thunderous ocean of silver, gray, and fire. Below lies Berlin, the once proud capital of the Nazi Empire, now wrapped in smoke and anti-aircraft bursts. Flying above the chaos is Colonel Donald Blakesley, commander of the famed 4th Fighter Group. His voice crackles through the radio. "All right, boys. Welcome to Berlin. Let's make it count." Around him, more than 700 B-17s and B-24s grind through the frozen air, engines straining under full load. And for the first time, the P-51 Mustangs are with them every step of the way. It's not just an escort mission, it's a declaration. The Allies can now reach anywhere, strike anything, and come home again. From 30,000 feet, the ground below looks like a shifting, burning map. German flak batteries spit black blossoms of shrapnel into the sky. Columns of smoke rise from bombed-out rail yards. And cutting through it all, weaving, diving, fighting, are the silver streaks of the Mustangs. Major Robert Goebel, flying his P-51D Flying Dutchman, spots a formation of Messerschmitt 110s, twin-engine fighters rushing toward the bombers. "I see them." 110s, 6 o'clock high. He banks left sharply, dives, and the Merlin engine screams to life. 50 caliber tracers flash through the cold air, stitching across one of the German planes. A hit. The enemy fighter explodes into a fireball. Debris spinning down through the cloud cover. "Scratch another!" Goebel calls out, his voice shaking from adrenaline. For the Luftwaffe, this is the nightmare they feared. The P-51's range of nearly 1,800 kilometers means there's no sanctuary, no safe zone beyond the reach of Allied air power. Within weeks, the skies over Germany turn into a deadly trap for the Reich's best pilots. Fuel shortages, lack of training, and relentless Allied raids thin their numbers daily. Even the elite Jagdgeschwader 26 and JG2, once feared across Europe, now find themselves outnumbered and outperformed. Captured pilot reports speak of despair. They come from the sun, out of nowhere. We cannot shake them. The silver ones never leave. On the ground, German civilians hide in cellars as the thunder of the raids shakes the earth. Above, the Mustangs soar past burning rooftops, their wings flashing silver in the smoke-choked light. And in the Allied bases back in England, the message spreads like wildfire. The Mustangs went to Berlin. and came back. That single sentence changes everything. The Allied High Command realizes what it means. The Luftwaffe's defensive wall has been shattered. From now on, no city, no industrial plant, no stronghold is beyond reach. General Jimmy Doolittle, commanding the 8th Air Force, orders a bold new directive. Our fighters are not just escorts anymore. They will seek out and destroy the enemy wherever he hides. It's a death sentence for the Luftwaffe. From March 1944 onward, the P-51s take the fight directly to the German airfields, strafing runways, fuel depots, hangars. By June, the skies over France are under Allied control. By August, the Luftwaffe is a shadow of what it once was. And as D-Day approaches, the Mustangs sweep ahead of the invasion fleet, clearing the skies for the greatest amphibious operation in history. That summer, Allied pilots paint the invasion stripes, black and white bands, on their Mustang wings. They lift off before dawn, streaking toward Normandy. Below, landing craft churn through the rough Channel waters. The sun rises over the beaches, smoke drifts from the cliffs. From above, the Mustangs watch over thousands of men waiting ashore. No German aircraft appear. None dare. The air war, once dominated by the Luftwaffe, now belongs to the silver-winged Mustangs and the pilots who fly them. As one war correspondent writes from the coast of France, when the Mustangs appeared above the beaches, it felt like the sky itself had taken our side. April 1945, somewhere over southern Germany. The war is ending, though no one dares say it aloud. Below, rivers of refugees pour through ruined towns. Smoke rises from what's left of the Third Reich, skeletal factories, cratered roads, shattered rail lines. And above it all, the P-51 Mustangs still roam silver ghosts over a dying empire. Captain John C. Meyer of the 352nd Fighter Group tightens his gloves inside the cockpit of Petty Second. His Mustang gleaming in the morning sun, the radio hums with static. The Luftwaffe, once a roaring predator, is now a whisper, scattered, broken, desperate, but still dangerous. Red Leader, this is Blue 2, contact 11 o'clock low. Looks like FW-190s, maybe a dozen. Meyer glances down through the haze. The German fighters weave clumsily, their movements erratic. Young, barely trained pilots flying obsolete machines. He exhales. Copy that, Blue 2, let's finish it. The Mustangs dive. Merlins scream. The sky explodes into fire and smoke. Within minutes, the fight is over. 4 German planes burn on the forest floor. The rest flee eastward, running not just from the Mustangs, but from the war itself. Meyer levels out, his reflection shimmering in the canopy glass. That's it, he whispers. That's the last one. He isn't wrong. The Luftwaffe's final breath is spent. By the time the Allies reach Berlin, the Mustang's legend is secure. The aircraft that began as an underdog, an emergency British contract for a foreign airframe, has become the most feared fighter of the war. Its impact was total. In just over a year of full service, the P-51s destroyed nearly 5,000 enemy aircraft in the air and thousands more on the ground. Its escort missions allowed American bombers to strike deep into Germany without catastrophic losses, paving the way for the destruction of the Reich's war industry. And perhaps most remarkably, its design, lightweight, aerodynamic, and powered by that Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, gave birth to a new era of aviation efficiency and speed. General Carl Spaatz, commander of U.S. Strategic Air Forces in Europe, summed it up simply, "The Mustang is the aircraft that won the air war over Europe." May 8, 1945, V-Day. Across Europe, bells ring and crowds flood the streets. In England, at the muddy airfields where the Mustangs once took off at dawn, pilots and mechanics gather beside their planes in stunned silence. Lieutenant Robert Bob Hoover, one of the Mustang's youngest pilots, later recalled, "The sky was quiet for the first time in years. You almost missed the sound of the Merlin." A few pilots run their hands along the fuselages, the chipped paint, the bullet scars, the names scrawled beneath the cockpits. They know they've witnessed something extraordinary. As night falls, engines fire up one last time. A handful of P-51s rise into the twilight sky, circling the airfield in formation before peeling off one by one. Their silhouettes vanish into the clouds, proud, swift, eternal. The sound of those engines fades, but the echo lingers. In the decades that follow, the P-51 Mustang becomes more than a weapon. It becomes a symbol. A symbol of courage, ingenuity, and the unbreakable bond between engineer and pilot. A machine born from necessity, perfected by vision, and proven in fire. The engineer who first dared to mount a British Merlin engine into an American airframe could never have imagined what he unleashed. An aircraft that turned the tide of a world war, saved thousands of lives, and redefined what flight could be. Today, when a restored P-51 takes to the air at an airshow, the crowd still falls silent at that familiar, spine-tingling sound, the smooth, rolling thunder of the Merlin. Because it's not just an airplane, it's history in motion. It's the moment man's imagination met its destiny and conquered the sky.